Welcome to the FMCG guys. I'm your host, Daniel Torres, accompanied by host number 2 or number 1 as you prefer it, Efrain Rosario. Hi, Efrain.
1A, 1B works for me. Hey, Daniel, good to be with you.
It can be one day each, can be one or number.
Yeah, depends on the day.
Exactly. So, Efrain, since you have a lot of experience in FMCG, you've worked now at the IGO, worked at Coke before. How do FMCG companies, or how do you personally look for innovation in FMCG?
It's a good question, and it's one that's I think it's always timely, because I think it's always something that people at FMCG brands and retailers should be thinking about. I would say that it's a combination of innovation coming from internal sources, but also looking externally as well. So I think, my experience has been that, there are things you can do internally to help drive more innovation in terms of, like, for example, things like future back design thinking and, your traditional stage gate processes. I mean, I think those things are obviously invaluable in terms of driving internal innovation. But I think, you do have to look externally as well and look and see what's happening in the industry, what's happening with new entrants that are coming in, that, don't have the same, let's call it, operating conditions that you do and are able to move more nimbly. So I think it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, no, I think that in certain markets, like in the UK, we see, like, whenever I go there, is in the supermarket, a lot of like smaller brands that are up and coming, which I think is very interesting. And some of them become later big hits in the industry as well. So that's obviously a space to be always looking at. I look at them as a consumer and as a headhunter and as a podcaster, but also big corporates look at them as more.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it right, which is that maybe not so much as an investor, but, as a consumer, right? We're all consumers. So I think there's a general desire for discovery as consumers in terms of, like, wanting to try new things in certain categories as well. So yeah, I'm kind of like you. I love going and exploring in stores for that.
Exactly. So to understand more about, like, how innovation works in FMCG, we bring someone in from a very peculiar place. So we are bringing in Alex Smith, joining us from the UK. He's the commercial director at YF, which is an accelerator for FMCG brands. So I'll be very curious to know how he's seeing, like, innovation in FMCG and how YF in particular is helping small brands, new and up-and-coming brands grow in the market.
Yeah, hi. So I am Alex Smith. I'm the commercial director at YF. YF is a business that sits at the center of kind of innovative FMCG brands in the UK, working with brands, retailers, and investors to take early stage innovative concepts and help scale those brands into mainstream propositions.
Would it be what sometimes is called or referred to as incubator? Or not?
Yeah, exactly. So how does the model work versus maybe some other things that exist out there, or maybe some more traditional models? So yeah, like an incubator accelerator, if we're thinking about the ones that typically maybe run by people in the investment world, where it might be like a, specified, defined, 6, 9, 12-week program. It's not that. The model of YF actually started as a community. The community still exists as a not-for-profit part of what we do. And then the business of YF is a more straightforward services model. So engaging us essentially as consultants to help you scale the brand.
And as a commercial director, what do you exactly do within this model?
Yeah, so responsibilities include everything around revenue propositions, but also marketing. We're very lucky in the sense that the majority of our work comes through inbound and referral now, having been around 6 years and developed a reputation here in the UK. working not only with brands based in the UK, but also supporting international brands to launch into the UK, because clearly the UK is a scale market. It's an advanced FMCG market. Lots of people want to be here.
Okay, great. And I know that you haven't been like all your life doing what you're doing now, working in this different innovative part of FMCG. How did you start? Because I know that your beginning was more of an orthodox one, right?
Yeah, very kind of orthodox start to my career. Like very orthodox in the sense of, a lot of people in FMCG don't grow up wanting, doctor, firefighter, FMCG never comes out of a kid's mouth, does it? So, graduated into the recession of 2008. So the mad scramble for a job. And so like a lot of people, ended up in FMCG by accident, but in a business that was just the most phenomenal business to start my career in. So I was in fresh produce for just over 3 years, did a graduate scheme, everything from working inside a factory, through to that's where my commercial career started. And that business sat between farmers and the big UK supermarkets. So not a branded business, 95% of that revenue went through own label products. But just a really incredible grounding, own label fresh produce.
Yeah,
hugely competitive.
You have to really look at when you're working private label, like it's really all about the margins, right? So
yeah, wafer thin margins. But really it's about relationships.
More about the volumes actually than the margins.
Yeah, exactly. Millions and millions of carrots where you're making a quarter of a penny, maybe. So yeah, I think what that really teaches you, that category, I think own label categories, particularly fresh own label categories where the margins are so slim, is just the strength of relationships and how important they are. Because ultimately, fresh produce, everybody's using the same seeds, tractors, parts of the world to grow these things in. The difference between you and your competitor isn't your brand. It is literally your people. And obviously you have to make sure you're investing in supply chain operation to make sure that your cost of production is competitive, but it still comes down predominantly to your people. Certainly that's my belief and my experience from that time. And then from that business went into Mars, had a very happy 10 years at Mars. And again, quite orthodox commercial career. It started as an account manager on the smaller accounts, got into the bigger accounts, and experienced all of the major grocery accounts, convenience, wholesale, and that kind of traditional corporate development path of get functionally good and then really develop the leadership style as well. So I'd finished my time at Mars leading teams of account managers and managing cross-functional teams, more so than, the kind of early stage individual contributor roles. And then, COVID hit. Good. I just had my first kid, classic kind of inflection point of, okay, done 10 years at Mars pretty much. What do I want to do next?
What a great time to leave a stable job in a big corporate and go and do something entrepreneurial.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe a little bit of a risk taker, who knows? My wife still works at Mars, so there is still some stability in the household. What do I want to do? Kind of inflection point came up, and you'll probably get a sense through the recording of this, not a hugely corporate person, and wanted to return back into that SME environment that I'd, been involved in produce, because the teams in produce businesses, they're so lean just through the nature of that category. It's a very entrepreneurial SME approach, even if the revenue numbers are probably not SME revenue numbers. And then, wanted to get back into that culture with just kind of everything I'd learned at Mars behind me. And like a lot of these things in life, had been introduced to the founder of YF, Thea, during that initial lockdown period. Classic kind of business networking. Someone that I knew her, thought we should connect because we'd get on. We started talking, there was no vacancy. And then kind of 2021, it was, okay, actually, I think we could do with someone with your commercial background in the team. Honestly, like, it wasn't a particularly long decision. I think, to go, and I'd already been considering, I guess, leaving Mars to go and work in a challenger brand. And then, with YF, kind of sitting at the center of that ecosystem in the UK, the opportunity to not just work in a up and coming brand, but actually work with, hundreds of them, as well as, the opportunity to sit on the leadership team of a small business and really like bring that kind of passion and for people and development and all that great stuff that's so strong in the Mars culture, but really kind of put it to life in building a team from a in an early stage business that's still under 10 years old, small team, really have an impact on culture.
Yeah.
So Alex, you touched on it earlier with regards to YF and in essence its business model. I'm curious to hear from you in terms of its purpose or its brand purpose in regards to, like, if you think about it from like, what is the mission or the aspiration behind YF?
So we exist to scale innovative brands, and we're built on a core belief of collaboration over competition, which is why the business started as a community. I guess like bringing that up to modern day, whether you're looking at, brands, retailers, investors, and how they can all influence, accelerating innovation, there's just a lot of bottlenecks. It's undeniable that consumers want more of these smaller independent brands. That's why the big FMCGs are launching brands that would appear small and independent. But there are, in some respects, like quite low barriers to entry to start a business within FMCG, but there's some quite significant barriers to scaling it.
Yeah, spot on.
So we exist, the real mission is taking those barriers down, reducing those bottlenecks.
Yeah. And you work, and you referenced this earlier as well, which is that you work across categories, right? So you look at pretty much the gamut of FMCG. Is that right? In terms of the brands that you all work with?
Yeah, exactly. The most straightforward way I think about it is put yourself in a supermarket. We're dealing with everyone that isn't general merchandise.
That's a broad remit for sure.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Obviously,
in terms of scale, literally pre-revenue startups, quite often some concepts that, aren't even at a, final production, doesn't have a barcode stage, through to, larger businesses that have scaled, to 50, 60 million of revenue. And that's how we think about it. There are some commonalities to the challenges that brands have from kind of 0 to 50, 60 million, but there are also obviously very, very large differences. So we think about things in terms of growth stage. There's likely to be, irrespective of what category your product actually sits in, you'll have some similar challenges, 0 to 500,000, 500,000 to 2 million, as you go up.
That's got to be a fascinating thing to watch. Like in terms, like you're almost like you fast tracked that growth process of being able to see all of those phases in that journey in regards to like going from like, you know, like literally the idea and concept all the way through to like a scale up, like you said, upwards of 50 to 60 million in annual revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And we're lucky, you know, some of those founding community brands have turned into real success stories. You know, Little Moons, Candy Kittens, Dash Water. You know, we're absolutely not allowed to have favourites at YF because we work with so many brands. But you know, those guys would be ones that you would call out as success stories.
Yeah.
But I think what's really important, and this links, I suppose, to a bit about our business model, but also our ethos, which is, you know, we don't control the brands in any way. We're not offering our services for equity, or anything, you know, some of the more traditional models that might exist. So the brands have done that, you know, and I always remind the guys of this, you know, the younger guys in the team, who maybe the majority of our team have got industry experience, but for some of those that haven't worked inside a brand, you know, we're in this fortunate position, as you just described it, is, you know, we can kind of observe it all happening. We're not actually in the true coalface of a brand. And, you know, it's tough for everybody out there, given the macro kind of economic climate. But if you're an SME, the last, you know, from COVID 2020, 2021, you know, just survive through to, you know, what's going on economically and how that is impacting things is brutal out there, for SMEs, at the moment. But yeah, we're in this such fortunate position of, working with such a, you know, huge variety of brands and therefore people, which is what I love.
And how are you working? Like, what is the day-to-day of that interaction with brands? I guess that your stakeholders is the brands that you're working with. I don't know if you're involved as well, like in conversation with retailers, with investors out there. How does that work for you guys?
Yeah. So this is the other thing that, I mean, I think from just coming at it personally and from a career experience point of view, this is where I've learned so much in this role is really outside of, recruitment, which is one of our services, and obviously relatively straightforward and turnkey. Every other engagement we have, be it brand, retailer, investor, is completely bespoke to what they need. And that's what makes the job so interesting. So, you know, if we go back to that growth stage analogy and the fact that there are differences, but the commonalities of people's issues are going to sit within essentially our kind of three sweet spot service areas, which is where the team are arranged. So people, which is recruitment and training, you know, whether you're early stage 1, 2 founder business, at some point you're going to need some people, through to you know, larger businesses need access to the best talent, irrespective of stage. Supply chain and operations, you know, depending on what your career background is, not always the most attractive, sexy part of the industry. But, you know, how many times have I had a conversation with the commercial director of a retailer that says, you know, the single biggest reason that innovative new brands don't last very long is because their supply chains are fragile. And then commercial. So, you know, helping brands with their growth strategies. And yeah, there are kind of in-house sweet spot areas. And then through the nature of community, we've built up the most amazing roster of, you know, independent freelancers and other agencies that can help you with technical, regulatory, you know, marketing, PR, digital, whatever it may need to be. So really how we like to work with brands is, you know, whatever the problem or opportunity is, give us a call and we'll either be able to help you or know someone that will. In terms of retailers, investors, it comes again to life slightly differently. So sometimes it might be more consultative, you know, project based. Again, you know, come back to this. Retailers are all really, you know, they're all keen to find the next Fever Tree tonic. and not every brand is going to be Fever-Tree Tonic. But there are also, and this is a bottleneck, right, that I was talking about earlier. There's also, look at companies' house data. There's more brands being registered, businesses being registered in this space than ever before. So you've got supermarket buyers sitting there inundated with opportunity, but at the same time, super, super busy, dealing with their business as usual from, their major brands, their own label suppliers.
Yeah.
So we can help with that. We can help with the find and the filter. And that's why we don't take any kind of control in any of the brands, because clearly if we were anyone's distributor or agent, or we're a shareholder, we're not able to be objective and agnostic in the way that we can support retailers. And then that obviously then translates quite straightforward as well into how we can work with investors. With investors, we can get hands on with brands through our connections with the investment world. And we're working with investors kind of pre and post investment.
Yeah, I can see as you're describing it, how it's very different than like what we would think of as like, the traditional incubator. It's it's a completely different business model in terms of the way it's set up. So, one of the things that's fascinating to me, in what you described, in that, because you guys are so diverse in regards to all the categories that you look at, in the FMCG space, based on all your interactions with all these, innovative new brands, what do you consider to be some of like let's call it the shared or the common unmet needs or motivations that a lot of these brands are able to fulfill in the marketplace? Like, is there anything that you kind of are consistently seeing across the brands that you work with?
Yeah, I think we talk around better for you or better for planet, or both. I think we'd all subscribe to in 2023 brands need to have a purpose. And yeah, I think that's the commonality. Occasionally you'll see something, new. You could call it innovative. I'm thinking things like Prime Drink at this point. Is there really a purpose there? That's much more, hard commercial play. That's not to discredit like that's achieved, to break through and build that much scale that quickly in this industry is impressive.
I will tell you quickly that my daughter said that she wanted to try Prime, and I asked her, like Prime Video? Showing my ignorance, but then she in a completely different country is aware of it. So obviously, like you said, from a awareness, let's call it marketing standpoint, they're obviously doing something right in terms of being able to reach that audience.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think that the commonality would be around purpose, and that tends to come to life in better for you or better for planet or both. Yeah. And you see that with, we're a proud B Corp. It's just been B Corp month last month. There's 1,200 B Corps in the UK now. The biggest single sector is food and drink brands. So, well over 50% of the B Corps in the UK are
and as somebody who worked at a B Corp in the US, I have a lot of love for that community. So I think, like, as you said, in terms of like brands that know their purpose, that's fundamental to what being a B Corp is all around. And obviously there's a lot of other things that go into it. But it's also interesting because you talk about community and the community that exists with YF. Obviously the B Corp community is actually one of its stronger elements also, because, like you said, in these 1,200, just in the UK alone, there's a lot of power behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just misquoted the stat there, actually. Over 50% of them exist in London, but the biggest single sector is still food and drink brands within B Corps in the UK. But yeah, that we're a proud B Corp. We obviously don't have a product. We're a services model.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's so great about that B Corp community is it's certainly in the trade, I think, the next phase of B Corp's life is building an awareness with consumers. But I think in industry, what's so great about B Corp is it's not like maybe some of the accreditations of the past, like fair trade, which, an accountancy firm couldn't have ever registered for fair trade farming. And I think that's what's great about B Corp is it's just a standard that can sit across literally every industry, every vertical in the world. But it brings people together around that common purpose of, it's not just about profit. It's about how you're running a business, which is what that's why we're so proud to be one.
And Alex, what about if a brand wants to work with you guys? Like, what's the process like of engaging? Do you go for them? Do they find you? How does it normally work? And how do you actually decide if you're going to partner with a brand or not?
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty organic. We're lucky now that the majority of people find us or refer to us. The community of entrepreneurs in the UK is pretty tight. So word of mouth does a really great job. We obviously put a lot of effort into making sure that we go to all the trade shows and get seen, and that's probably the way we meet most of the international brands that we might work with. In terms of how would we assess who we wouldn't work with, because we're, again, not an accelerator, not investing, really we would apply a lens of, do we believe this is going to scale? Now scale can mean different things. And again, this is appropriate. Not everything is going to be the next Fever Tree, but also not everything needs to be the next Fever Tree. So scale might mean, purely D2C. It might mean, getting us, the largest customer that brand's going to have is Waitrose and never be in a Tesco. Or it might be, nothing to do with traditional grocery retail and exist only in out of home locations. But we would want to feel that we shared that founder's belief in the opportunity for that brand to scale.
So you talked about a couple of the success stories. You referenced Little Moons, you referenced Dashwater, and I don't want to put you on the spot because, like you said, you can't have favorites because, you love all your children equally. But are there can you tell us a little bit more about those or other success stories just in regards to kind of what you've witnessed in terms of seeing them go through this this growth journey, with you guys at their side?
Yeah. Maybe I'll approach that by what are the projects that we enjoy getting involved in the most?
Sure.
You talked about a commonality of, you asked earlier about what's the commonality of maybe these brands, and I talked around purpose. I think what I've noticed in my 2 years now of meeting hundreds of entrepreneurs is the commonality to me that seems to exist in me in the founders of brands that go on to scale have this pretty unique mix of being people that are clearly, quite a single-minded vision and belief that what they've got is going to be something. And that, and they're quite bloody-minded, and, you would be hard-pressed to persuade them that it isn't going to be something. And they have that, just determination and resilience that you have to be an entrepreneur. But then the commonalities of those entrepreneurs that have had successful brands is they're then also quite open-minded to the fact they don't know everything. And they are going to need some help along the way. And that doesn't need to be help from us. It can be help from, wherever they need to get it. But that kind of mix seems to be a commonality. And I say that as someone, I'm not a founder. I don't consider myself an entrepreneur in that traditional sense. I'm, still an employee at the end of the day. And then, like favorite projects, again, like what's so fun about our business model is different founders will come from different backgrounds. We see that, 3/4 of the founders we work with have got no prior industry experience. And that's why they innovate. I believe they innovate such great products is they really are coming at it as a consumer. There's no, they're not influenced by a portfolio of existing products. They're not looking at a spreadsheet of how they're going to, try and sell more of this type of product and less of that type of product. They are just genuinely spotting gaps in markets. But they're all coming with some level of experience from somewhere. And that means sometimes they engage us in quite different ways. Is it around helping develop their team? Is it around, their sales and marketing people? They know that they need to get their supply chain right. And we can just really get involved in really partnering with them to find the right manufacturer, warehouse, logistics, systems, solutions that's going to fit their business model? Or is it that, actually they really understand product really well, but just don't really understand the game of supermarkets, wholesalers, and how you actually go about building out those distribution points? And we can really partner with them and support them with, people like me and others in the team that have, played that game for 15 years.
Mm-hmm. And what about like new categories coming up, like new product, like if you have to think of the exciting categories that are gonna do well in the next year or two, like what would you put your bet on?
Well, this is always the $1 million question. If I had my own money to invest, where would I invest it? So it's so hard to answer because innovation is a word. It's such a huge word. It's a broad church, isn't it? And I think, and I was thinking about this because I knew this question would come up. And I was discussing this actually at dinner just last night with the founder of a brand. And we were laughing about, is this because we're starting to get older? But we get more excited about innovations in like quite unsexy categories.
Mm.
So be that around, plastic and sustainability and how that's going to impact packaging, over the next few years. That kind of like packaging innovation excites me.
There's a lot of runway there too. That's just it. I mean, there's so much that you could do, particularly with the purpose of, again, better for you, better for the planet, right? I mean, there's just a lot of room for improvement.
Exactly. So that sort of area excites me. I think that alternative proteins is going to continue to be a massive growth trend. So, not just in the sense of plant-based, but, look at, closed loop sustainable farming of insects to provide protein for animal feed and pet food. That's exciting in its very early stages. You've then got, again, like alternative, the meats that, some of the stuff around lab grown or using 3D printers in the food industry, all sorts of innovations over in that space, as, kind of underneath alternative protein. And then I think one of the things, is definitely starting to come through in a branded trend in the world that I work in is, health's been the biggest driver of what people buy since as long as anyone's been analyzing drivers to purchase, right? Health. Yeah. People have wanted to be healthier for forever. But I think how that's coming to life now in brands, maybe versus 5-10 years ago, healthy brands looked very healthy 5 to 10 years ago. I'm seeing some brands come to life now where actually, you look at what Urban Legend are doing, the HFSS compliant Krispy Kreme donut. It doesn't look like a healthy donut. And it isn't. Like a donut isn't healthy, right? That's a contradiction in terms, but it's significantly healthier than a Krispy Kreme. It's allowing consumers to have a healthy alternative. But you go and look at that brand, it doesn't say it's healthy. It looks, bright colors, just like you'd expect a donut brand to look. But in other categories, I think when healthy alternatives have come to life, it's looked healthy. And consumers don't want to be lectured. They want to be healthy or healthier, but they don't want to be lectured about it. And, and we all know this from being around the industry. Consumers don't read labels. They're at the shelf for, a couple of seconds if you're lucky. So that's another reminder to founders I find myself often giving, which is, there's no point putting 10 claims on the front of your pack because no one's going to read them. Hopefully that's answered the question. I haven't sat on the fence too much.
Well, no, I'm actually, just even learning from you in terms of like Urban Legend, that's not something, obviously I know Krispy Kreme being American. I don't know Urban Legend. So you've given me something to go and explore and learn more about. So, and among all the other things you told us today as well. So it's always an education when we have a chat, and I'm looking forward to connecting in person at Shop Talk. But I wanted to thank you. Obviously, this has been great. Getting a little bit more insight into YF and how you all work with this portfolio of brands. So one final question that we ask all of our guests, and this is in essence going to be asking you to kind of in essence get in, into that time machine and go back in time. And if you could tell, Alex before he started working in fresh produce, and you could give Alex one piece of advice, having, learned what you've learned over the last, 13 plus years, what would that one piece of advice be?
Yeah, great question. I would say to myself, trust your instincts and spend less time looking left and right.
This was Alex Smith, Commercial Director at YF. So, Efrain, what are your key takeaways from this conversation?
Well, I think in addition to learning about a host of new brands that I want to try out next time I'm in the UK, I always really enjoy speaking with Alex and just getting his point of view in terms of how he's able to really kind of in essence see companies that kind of go across the gamut of the growth journey, right? So everything from like early stage startups all the way to established scale-ups, that are doing upwards of 50 million pounds in revenue annually. So I think getting his perspective in terms of like being able to see that growth trajectory for that many different kinds of companies in so many different categories is and continues to be fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was also interesting to know and to remind ourselves that actually bringing a new brand to market is not easy. The supply chain, the logistics behind it, the production, like all these like things that are like the bottom of the iceberg that you don't see and are key to succeeding. And a company that like YF really can help that happen.
Well, and I think he hit the nail on the head when he said that in a lot of the categories where they're involved, there are low barriers to entry, but extremely high barriers to scaling. And that's where they come in, right? In terms of being able to help companies get through those barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know people myself that have really struggled with, production etc. So it's interesting to see that.
Yeah. And I also think it's fascinating to hear him talk about, what are the trends that he's seeing across the variety of companies that they advise. And, the fact that there's, this critical mass of companies that are looking at better for you and better for the planet.
Yeah.
And thinking about brand purpose more, I guess, deliberately, I think is really, really interesting. And, he talked about some of the forms that can take, right? So like, he mentioned plant-based protein, but it can kind of, in essence, happen in a lot of different ways, right? And maybe in a lot of ways that we don't typically think of. It's not just the plant-based protein hamburger patties, but it's thinking about things like, for example, using insects for animal feed. So, and new technologies like 3D and those kinds of things. So it's interesting to see how he's seeing that being on the ground floor of a lot of this innovation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that everybody would like to spend more time looking at innovation, and even from a podcasting perspective, even personally from an investment perspective, I think I would like to spend more time. So it was good to have this approximation to it. Well, thanks, Efraim, for being with me here today on this Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks to our audience as well. Most of you won't be listening to us on a weekend. But thanks.
Well, people like, on the run, if you want to listen to us with your out running errands or going out for your Saturday morning jog, we're equal opportunity. We like all the listeners.
Yeah, and by the way, lately we're getting more and more feedback from people. So please don't stop it coming. Do reach out to us if you have any suggestions of content. And then what would be great is if you could put a small review on your podcasting app, because we don't have many of them yet, and that would obviously help us a lot to continue producing. And hey, having a nice pat on the back is not bad every now and then. Well, thanks for listening to us again, and we'll see you in the next episode.